Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So I feel confident that I'll get a good answer for this because I know I have a few ringers in the congregation tonight. We are coming up, of course, to the holiday of Purim. And Purim has a lot of famous customs and traditions, but it also has 4 actual mitzvot. And those 4 mitzvot are, if anyone would like to give me just one of them. Hearing the Megillah, absolutely, hearing the Megillah, and that's a very important distinction. Hearing is the mitzvah. Now, if you have to be your own loudspeaker, then by all means recite it for yourself. Otherwise, we will be having our Purim celebration Saturday and Sunday, and you are welcome to fulfill that mitzvah right here at Temple Israel. Number 2, matanot le'evyonim, giving gifts to the poor, giving gifts to the poor. That is the other mitzvah to make sure that they too can celebrate in joy and gladness on that day of Purim. Mitzvah number 3 may be very, very similar to mitzvah number 2, but technically different. Mishloach manot, giving gifts to other people, whether they are in need or not, but giving gifts to other people as well, so that we enhance that celebration, because as we all know, food tastes better when someone else has made it. It's the great paradox of a sandwich, right? Any sandwich you make doesn't taste as good as the sandwich someone else made for you. Which brings us to what we've been building up to, mitzvah number 4. Well, let's refine that a little bit. So say again what you said. Drinking. All right, so we never drink on an empty stomach. All right, very, very important rule. There is the obligation to have a seudah, to have a feast on Purim. Now, a lot of people get this mitzvah wrong, so let me clarify a few things before we get into the meat of the topic. It is not a mitzvah to drink on the evening of Purim. It is not a mitzvah to drink in the morning of Purim. It is a mitzvah to have a feast which will include some imbibing of additional alcohol than perhaps as usual in the afternoon of Purim. Which this coming year would be a Sunday afternoon. Because if you do it at night, you may not wake up in the morning in time for the Megillah reading the next day, or if you overdid it that night, you may not have as much joy as you are meant to have. Not to mention the fact that you might be a danger to yourself and others as you leave the synagogue and head home. A little tipple is okay, but the main point of the feasting, which includes the drinking that is so famous, happens in the afternoon of Purim, after all the other mitzvot have been done, after we have given all of our gifts to those in need and those of our friends, and after we have heard the Megillah reading. Great. Now, the real question is, we are obligated to feast? Isn't that kind of weird? I mean, God said, we need you to hear the Megillah. Okay, makes perfect sense. We need to have the Megillah heard because, well, it is the story. And we need to give gifts to the poor. That one's very obvious, fitting in very nicely with all the other themes of Judaism. That how can I be happy if I know others are not? And giving gifts to each other, okay, it's not exactly the kind of thing that I always imagine I need to do, but it makes sense that sharing is caring and all those other good things. But I am obligated to sit down and stuff my face? That just seems a little gratuitous, doesn't it? A little gluttonous, maybe.
It opens up the book of Esther with a feast, and it closes with a feast.
So the main events of the story of the book of Esther revolve around feasting. I should point out, however, in both of the main feasts that are covered in the story, someone gets in trouble. So it's not exactly to recommend itself. I mean, Vashti gets in trouble and Haman gets the end and is just desserts. Thank you. At a feast. So just dessert, food. Anyway, so you might think that perhaps we would be warned against feasting on Purim, given what we see in the narrative. But the thing is, Judaism actually understands how humans work. And Judaism, by and large, wants to work with how we work. So, most of us, I think, would be willing to admit that we feel better when we've had a nice meal. That we feel better when we have relaxed around the table with family or friends, and we have maybe had a little to drink, and we've had some nice food that maybe we don't get all the time, that actually makes us feel better. Judaism, unlike many other faith traditions, doesn't fight that. It doesn't say, how dare you feed the gluttony of your body, that God is absent from the material pleasures of the world and should only be found in the rarefied spiritual activities which have nothing to do with this corrupt mortal flesh. Now, Judaism says, actually, this mortal flesh has its problems, but it does have its perks too. And one of those perks is to enjoy a nice meal with family and friends. And to do so opens up those other spiritual activities as well. That when the body is satiated, when we have allowed ourselves to feel the physical joy of a day that God has specifically designed and ordained for us, then we can also truly understand and enjoy the spiritual lessons, the psychological lessons, the emotional lessons, the historical lessons that come from that day as well. That this awakens something inside of us. Indeed, that is one of the reasons why Esther invited Ahasuerus and Haman to the party where she was going to expose Haman. She wanted her husband, Ahasuerus, to be in a good mood. And that meant she made a nice party for him to get him ready to hear what was going to be a very difficult truth. Purim reminds us that God gave us a body to enjoy. Now, there are reins and there are limits upon those enjoyments. This is not an anything goes kind of bacchanalia of the ancient world. This is not the fertility rites of the ancient Canaanites. This is a nice party, a good party, one that allows us to ennoble the physical pleasures that God has gifted us with to a higher end and higher purpose. By marrying that together, we can reflect upon the beauty that God gave us in the first place, of marrying together the mortal and the spiritual, eternal parts of ourselves. Together they work in service of God, and together one enriches the other. After all, without a reason for the celebration of Purim, would we necessarily set aside the time for joy and happiness? Would we necessarily set a time for feasting and revelry? Too often I have met too many that do not make that time. But our tradition has carved out that time, whether we like it or not, in order to please ourselves, in order to then open ourselves and thus please God in the process. So, by all means, come to our Purim celebrations, wear your fanciest costume, there will be prizes, we will have other hijinks involved, and remember that when you are home on Sunday afternoon and you are making your family dinner, make it a little extra special in honor of Purim. Open up that bottle of wine that you never hit so much, pour yourself an extra glass of whatever your favorite thing might be, prepare your nicest dishes, and allow yourself to both appreciate what God has given you physically and what we have been blessed with spiritually. It goes together beautifully. Shabbat Shalom.